2003's Robin Hood Defender of the Crown is one of my favorite strategy games from my childhood. This video you're watching started out as a review where I was going to revisit this classic, but that video got put on hold. After some research, I found out that I need to go back even farther to the classic that inspired the classic, 1986's Defender of the Crown. Defender of the Crown was released on a wide variety of systems, including the Nintendo Entertainment System and DOS computers, but the most significant version is the Amiga version, known for its superior graphics. The most readily available way to play the game today is by purchasing the game over on GOG, and this purchase will net you both the DOS and Amiga versions. I poked my head into the DOS version for the fun of it. It's almost identical to the Amiga in terms of gameplay, but the Amiga wins out based on looks and the ability to control the game using a mouse instead of just a keyboard, so the Amiga version will be the focus here in our review. This is my first exposure to the Amiga in general, but I think I'm going to get started here in the same way I do for every game that's older than I am, reading the manual. The manual has the expected introduction to the game and its mechanics that you would expect, but what caught my eye was a foreword by the executive producers of the game. This being their first game under the newly formed company Cinemaware, these 4 paragraphs read somewhat like a manifesto. In it, they pledge that this game is the first of many they plan on making that are interactive movies. These games wouldn't derive inspiration from other video games, but instead look to the world of cinema for their creative energy. The end result would be games that are tailored to more mature players, featuring role-playing and strategy combined with cutting-edge graphics to keep you on your seat. Oh, P.S. Software piracy is a crime, pass the word, not the disc. So, did Cinemaware succeed in making a game that felt like cinema? Let's see. In Defender of the Crown, you fill the iron boots of one of 4 Saxon knights vying for the crown in 12th century England, with Robin Hood playing a side role here as somewhat of a consultant if you want him. Each of the 4 knights has different attributes that will make you more proficient at different areas of this strategic warfare. The core of the game is simple. Each knight starts out with a small bit of territory and must expand that territory, take down the competitors, and unite all of England under them in order to be crowned victor. Combat is the only real way to accomplish this. Though the game features acquisition of gold as one of its mechanics, it doesn't weigh itself down with any broader economic systems that tie into other areas of the game, and this simplicity helps the experience feel kind of like a simple board game at times. Each space you control generates income, and that income is spent on a single thing: buying more units, who you will then use to control more spaces to generate more income and buy even more units. This loop will see you through until you've finally conquered the entire land and win the game. What breaks up this loop is also what makes the game more cinematic: the minigames. There are a few set actions in the game that will take you out of the strategist position and put you in a much more direct role. Launching a raid on an enemy castle will put you into a side-scrolling action game. A tournament being held for fame or for land will have you saddle up and try to out-joust a rival knight. Should you have a catapult handy, a siege on enemy walls will allow you to break in and conquer their territory. All of these minigames are great for the pacing of the broader experience, but I don't know if great is the word I would use to describe the games themselves. They all suffer from a distinct lack of player feedback. There is little to no visual effects or sound effects that occur when something is done correctly. Look at this thrilling sword battle here. Am I winning? It looks like I'm pushing them back, but I can't really tell what's going on, and I lost. Later that night, I have another sword battle and tackle it the exact same way I did the first time, and for whatever reason, I won this time. It's clear that while gameplay-wise these minigames may not be the star of the show, they certainly did at least one thing right. Alongside appealing to the target audience's power fantasies, this game's marketing was based on entirely showing off how freaking beautiful these minigames are. The first time I saw the shadow grow along the wall as I walked into a candlelit room, I was stunned. The trumpeteers blaring to signal the beginning of a tourney commencing are triumphant, and the saucy romance that may ensue with the damsel in distress has some damn good sprite work. When the producers said they wanted to make games that were more cinematic, it's clear that these sequences were really what they were talking about. I didn't know graphics from 1986 were even allowed to look this good, and the more traditional console gaming market wouldn't see graphics like this for years to come. It's just a shame that you don't spend more time looking at the beautiful parts of the game, because the primary view is that of the map, which is certainly a functional view, but one that's devoid of the same style that other areas of this game demonstrate. The map also brings to light the fact that the game's simplicity may actually be to its detriment. The dominant strategy here is one that's so dominant that you'll practically need to follow it. The best way to play this game is buying as many of the basic soldier units as your pockets can afford and just start conquering. The raids into enemy castles aren't lucrative enough to be worth the hassle. Buy as many soldiers as you can, expand every single turn, and do a tournament every once in a while to get even more land. Those are basically the only things worth doing, and it's a real shame that combat between armies, despite being the most important thing you can do to win, is one of the only actions not represented through a minigame. No clashing armies of any sort, just a still page where you see numbers go up and down. And despite this not having the cinematic charm of the minigames, it definitely carries their downside of the lack of clarity. The agency that you have here during battles is putting your army into different stances such as flanking or ferocious attacks. Without any visual representation, it's hard to understand why these numbers are shifting so wildly. Sometimes my opponent would have 1 or 2 less troops than me, and rather than having a somewhat even fight, my troops would absolutely destroy every single opponent with only like 1 casualty on my end, and I would never really have any idea why. So, Defender of the Crown certainly has its weak spots. The repetition and lack of depth in its systems make it so that there isn't much of a reason to play it again, but to pick up for a night or two, there's some fun to be had. It captured my interest for the 3 or so hours that I put into it, and that's a lot more than I can say about most games its age. I'm not exactly sure if Cinemaware hit their goal of making a game that felt like a movie. Instead, it feels a lot more like a board game with some movie clips that play at a couple key points in the action. But for a game that's 33 years old, I'd say that's not half bad, don't you think?